So this is the SSUPD Meshroom SV2. Okay, as we all know, the previous one was the SSUPD Mesh Delicious. That one is an ultra popular ITX fully mesh case that I believe a lot of small form factor enthusiasts really like it. And then this company, they released a slightly bigger, they call it the Meshroom S. And the one we have here is the gray color. They do have like, I believe 3 color options: black, white, and the gray. This gray is the first time we have seen, because the previous Mesh Delicious only comes in 2 color options, the black and white. Correct if I am wrong, but that is what I remember based on that. Nonetheless, the Meshroom S is so special is because this is probably one of the rare small form factor case that can support ATX motherboard. And right over here, I already completed a simple build inside this Meshroom S. And I'm just going to like share with you my experience building this case and some of the points that I want to point out, whether it's a good design or a bad design or something that can be improved and so on. And without further ado, let's dive straight into this Meshroom S. Now, first thing first, since I already completed this build, we'll do this reverse build, or more like a disassembly, just so that I can point out some of the features of this case and some of the points you might want to take note of. And first thing is the design throughout this entire case is fully mesh. Of course, you can also order a side panel with tempered glass, but that is, of course, you need to pay for that additional panel, because if I remember correctly, the default package is fully mesh and the additional panels is customer add-on. So all the panels are positioned in place using the pegs. As you can see, it's very simple, just metal mesh without any kind of dust filter on it. Of course,
is your dust filter.
Yeah, I mean, this is your dust filter. Of course, you can also get third-party dust filter cut to the size and then put it on it. But in other way, it will also like affect your airflow, because the mesh is pretty fine. So I guess it is good enough if you want to like filter out things. So let's just remove all the panels for now. It's very easy to remove, to be honest. The panels, because of the pegs, just remove it. If you want to remove some of those metal panels, of course you will need a screwdriver for that. Now, with all the panels taken off from the case, you can clearly see the structure of this Meshroom S. Oh, before we go into the other features, let's talk about the I/O. 2 USB Type A and 1 USB Type C. And interestingly, they have choose to position the power button at the back of this case here. Look at this, a single small power button. Not entirely sure why they choose to position it at such a location, given that it is quite obvious we have plenty of room for the front panel here. If you can see, plenty of room, not sure why. Unless they want to like give more space for the cable to run through. But the thing is, the power cable, the power switch cable is not that thick. It's basically a small, thin little cable. Not sure if the camera is picking up, but it's just a very thin cable. That also means that the front panel connector you need to connect to the motherboard is basically just the power switch. You don't have the hard disk, status, reset switch. You don't even have the, what was the other one?
Indicator LED.
Indicator LED, yeah, not even indicator LEDs also. Now, let's just talk about the first specialty of this case, the ability to support ATX motherboard. As you can see, the ATX motherboard basically takes up the entire width of the case here, to the point that if you were to use an ATX motherboard There is a problem actually. If I just take the front panel back here, not sure if the camera is picking up from that particular angle. Pretty obvious, you can see that the SATA ports and this front panel USB 3 connector is obviously inaccessible due to the placement of the front panel. Once you have the front panel, there's no way for you to connect the connectors that is facing at this side. Yeah, you can actually see the motherboard is actually
it's flush with the front panel.
It's from here, if you look through the structural sizing, but the motherboard is actually slightly wider than the structure itself. They are giving the space simply because the front panel, because of pegs and the actual mesh itself has some room in between. So you can when you have it attached to the case, I believe there is just a very thin hairline of gap between the front panel and the motherboard. One of my friends who came visit the other day, he told me one thing. If you were to use a expensive motherboard, you will face this issue because most of the time the expensive motherboards will have these connectors facing towards the side. But the inexpensive ones, the connectors will always facing towards,
perpendicular to the motherboard.
So you won't have this issue.
Okay.
Just like the USB-C connector for this one is actually facing outwards, so I can still connect to it.
Okay.
So just the USB 3 connector is not. That's why you can see this build is actually not utilizing this USB 3 connector. So that also means that when you decided to build a PC using this case, you will have to seriously consider your motherboard choice as well. And speaking of which, of course, this is a small form factor ITX case. You can also put in an ITX motherboard. Of course, if you put in an ITX motherboard, that means you will have more space at the bottom here. So that also give you more room for other components such as hard disk drive if you want to. But here's the thing about the motherboard choice that will also affect your other component choice. If you look closer at here, the placement of the power supply. If you were to use ATX motherboard, you can only use with a SFX power supply. Simply because there is so little room. They just have enough room for the riser card, the cable to run through in between the power supply and the motherboard to the back because your GPU is at the back. We'll talk about that later on. If you were to use ITX motherboard, then you will have both SFX power supply option, or you can also use a regular ATX power supply. Because if you were to use ATX power supply, because obviously you use ITX motherboard, the ITX motherboard just sit above the power supply, so you can use it. Here's some of the arguments why they decided that this case has this kind of support. It is said that this case allows an easier entry into small form factor builds, because let's say some of the users, they already own a motherboard, ATX motherboard, but they don't want to buy a new ITX motherboard to build a small form factor case. So they just reuse the ATX motherboard. What they need to do is just purchase a new SFX power supply, and then they can get started with ITX build. Or in another way around, if they already have a very good power supply, for example a titanium power supply, and they don't want to let this power supply to go wasted, so they just of course buy an ITX motherboard, and then they can just build everything in this case. Some concerns about ATX, full-size ATX power supply is the length of the cable. If you look at this, usually SFX power supply, you have shorter cables because they are meant to build in a tighter space. For example, this EPS power supply is just about the right length coming from here to the EPS connector on the motherboard here. As well as the 24-pin motherboard power supply, the cable, I don't have to like do some sort of acrobatic ties to manage the cables. They are pretty much stay in place, just enough length. Even the GPU 8-pin power supply cable is just enough length for me to come over here to the back to reach to the GPU. ATX power supply, on the other hand, they have longer cables. Longer cables means you will have to like find ways to manage. Good thing is that because if you were to use the bigger power supply, longer cables with smaller motherboards, that means you might have more space around this side just to hide it.
Not necessary. It kind of depends on what wattage you use. Some of them longer.
Yeah.
Then you might take up more space.
Yes.
And then you don't have enough place.
Yeah.
To
in other way around is it means that the amount of space you save using an ITX motherboard will end up being used up by the cables, unless you order custom cables that works specifically for your power supply.
Exponentially more expensive.
I mean that, yes, exponentially more expensive. Now, enough talking about the motherboard and the power supply. Of course, one thing I really hate is the routing of this riser cable. It also depends on what motherboard you want to use, because if you would want to use ATX motherboard, you will need a longer riser cable. And the longer riser cable is usually more expensive as well. And I think at the marketplace, they will sell the riser cable separately if you want the longer one. Also, routing this cable right here is not easy at all. Now, at the back here, so this is how they can support different power supply sizes. There's this bracket you can remove, so you can put in a bigger power supply. They have the screw holes here, so we just have to like unscrew the bracket, then you can use it. If you look closer, there's another special feature for the Meshroom S is the ability to adjust the different sizes for each chamber. Let me just talk about here, point out this thing. You have this panel you can remove, and then some of the parts you can adjust so that the motherboard tray can be moved slightly towards the right side, towards the motherboard side. That means you will have less room on the motherboard side, but you have more room on the GPU side or radiator side. That means you can put maybe up to 4 slots thickness of the GPU. Because right now the maximum supported thickness of GPU is 3 slots with. So if you like just move your motherboard tray to here, you give more room for the back side. Of course, that also means that you will no longer be able to use ATX motherboard if you were to choose to go with this direction. In that case, your only option is maybe small form factor power supply, and you must use a ITX motherboard for that.
And your cooler is also problematic.
And yes, if you look here, right now we're using the standard AMD Rave cooler, and it is just about the right height.
Oh my god.
I don't know if you can see, it's just about the right height. So it doesn't hinder anything, you can close the side panel without any issue. But if you were to move the motherboard tray, that means you can no longer use this kind of taller CPU cooler. I mean, I believe there is specifications on the website. Maybe you can show them the maximum height supported on both different modes. This case also supports AIO. Right now, I did not use the AIO cooler because of the support limitation. If you can see here, is that my GPU is positioned on the left side of the rear panel, because if you were to use the shorter PCIe riser cable, it is supposed to put the GPU at this side. But here's the flexibility part for this case. You have the ability to choose where you want to put your GPU on this side or on this side. But just to give you an idea how you can put a radiator on this side. This is LT520 240mm radiator. And if you can see from here, don't do this by the way, you are supposed to like have this installed first. But here's the idea, is very simple. You just have to like install the radiator on this side of the case. But why I did not do this is because if the camera can pick up this, the tubes coming out from the radiator is not recommended for it to bend it in this way. Because of the motherboard tray, the metal here is somehow blocking the tube coming out from the radiator, so you will have to like somehow bend it in an unnatural way, something like this. I'm not too comfortable to do this for this build. That's why I did not choose to install this AIO cooler. But you get the idea. You can do so, especially if you want to use some sort of custom loops, whereby you can use a different fitting over there so that you can give it like maybe a 90 degree or 45 degrees of bend there. Then at least you have a slightly natural flow of the tubing coming out from there. But you get the idea. You can put a radiator on this side. Of course, it is quite impossible to do push-pull simply due to the lack of room if you were to like look from this angle. And you will still need to give it some room for the air to like escape out. If you were to make it an intake fan, blow on the radiator, or you just use it as a pull from cool air through the radiator, the fan at the back. That's it. Yeah, I think that is probably one of the biggest challenges. Aftermarket AIO coolers, I don't remember seeing any of the radiators having a flexible tubings, except for the upcoming Lianli's, was it the Galahad or what? Maybe a Galahad 2, maybe I'll remember the name incorrectly, but hey, they do have a tubing at seat that can rotate by maybe 45 degrees. I think that would be a perfect choice for this build if you will want to like aftermarket AIO cooler. You don't want to have a custom loop, and that's it. Now let's talk about the GPU placement. And if you can see from here, you can actually mount your GPU horizontally if you were using those small form factor graphics cards. I mean, as long as the length is this, then you can place it in this way. The one we have here is the 3080 Ti Founders Edition. Obviously, you will have to like put it in a vertical mode. And like I mentioned just now, you can put either at the back or at the front here. I choose to put at the front here simply because we have a longer PCIe riser cable. I will have to like bend it in this way to face it here. Then my GPU can just attach it over here. If you can see from this side, because of this 12-pin to double 8-pin adapter, we still got enough room over here for the power supply cable to route it and then connect to the adapter. And one thing I would need to mention is the placement of your GPU and the display output ports is something you will need to consider about. Inside the package accessory box, SSUPD has included a 90-degree HDMI cable. And well, unfortunately, the Founders Edition card we have here, the HDMI port is being blocked by this metal panel here. So you will have to like study your components and foresee. Of course, you have to like check if there's anything block it. In this case, we should connect the HDMI cable first before installing it in place. This is all the challenges ITX builders will come through, and obviously in this case I did not foresee it. And if you were to install your GPU in this side, I don't think you will have any issue. But given the height of this case, if you can see here, I'm not sure if it's visible or not, you have little clearance for your Displayport cables especially. Most of our Displayport cables are thick and the headers are big, and they are not something I would say flexible.
And then the feet, time for the feet.
Yes, and that brings us to this special little package they have bundled inside, which is metal feet. Yes, they have included 4 metal feet that you can screw it to the bottom of the case. Obviously, if you want to use these feet, you will have to remove the original rubber feet.
Yeah,
first.
I don't get why you have to remove the original rubber feet. It seems a bit like they could have made it in a more better way.
Yeah, I believe so. Let's just give it some room here.
Yeah, then you can mount it.
Yeah,
inside.
then you can mount it because the screw hole is blocked by all these rubber feet here. And frankly speaking, I'm not a fan of this kind of a design. If you look at, let's just simulate how it will look like. I'm not sure if this is a good idea or not. Okay, this is maybe how it should look like when you have it installed.
Yeah, looks like stilettos, high heels.
High heels. That should give you enough room for, I mean, even if you're using 90-degree cables, you will still need some room for it to go around. So yeah.
From our test fit earlier, 90-degree DisplayPort cables will fit, but you will still need 90-degree cables. Those straight jack cables will not work.
Yes, this is one of the challenges for this kind of case.
Yeah, and also if you want to install the feet, please do it before assembling the entire thing.
Because the thing is screwed in from inside the case. They're supposed to the hole is here, you put, and then you screw in here. Because we have already completed everything else, it is so difficult to access the screw holes.
Yeah, we technically have to dismantle the whole thing.
Yes, that is also one of the big things we need to give it a thought before you get it started.
Yeah, the sequence of installing things in this case, that's something that you need to think through first.
That is the normal process for any ITX case buildings. So yes, something to think about that. Of course, if you were to use ITX motherboard, you will have more options, cooling options I should say. For example, at the front here, obviously you have fan brackets or fan mounts you can use to maybe install AIO radiator or even fans, more fans over here if you want to. So I would say this is a bigger mesh leashes with more options. Yes, it is a very unique feature to be able to support full-size ATX motherboard. MATX motherboard, definitely no issue. Of course, that comes with a lot of challenges you would want to address in case, because I don't really see a lot of a reason to use ATX motherboard in a small form factor case unless you have a case and then you have existing motherboard. I mean, with a full system, you can fully utilize it. And maybe you will simply hate the fact that ITX motherboards don't have 4 DIMM slots. So you wanted something ATX, you can put 4 RAMs, 6. Yeah.
Okay, in that case, talking about RAM slots, why not I get MATX? It's kind of in between,
hybrid.
best of both worlds.
Like I mentioned earlier, because of the design of the case here, even if you get an MATX motherboard, you are still restricted by a lot of the restrictions. For example, MATX motherboard and ATX motherboard has the same width. You are still restricted on this side. Of course, you have more space at the bottom here, but it doesn't give you the ability to use a full-size ATX. If you use MATX motherboard, you will still need to use a SFX power supply.
So you're getting the worst from both sides instead of the best?
Correct, you are getting worse on both sides, but I'm not saying it is ultimately worse. Because of MATX motherboard is slightly shorter, I believe it's this.
It is shorter.
And then you have some room here for you to like maybe cable manage. Yeah.
That's the whole main point. Okay, I want to talk about the GPU a bit.
Yes.
Assuming that if you have a GPU with a right side connector and you got like double 8 pins, then would it be a challenge?
Oh yes, that would be a challenge. So that's why most of the time, if you were to ask those experienced ITX builders, most of the time they will have those adapters, 90 degrees adapters, weird 90 degrees adapters to fit into different cases.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, that is how ITX builders
I don't know how you want to 90 degree two 8 pins that are side by side.
Yeah.
Cascading?
Could be. If not, otherwise they would have to use I remember there is a type of 90 degrees towards the other side there. Other than that, I think it's time to talk about the pricing.
Yes.
Based on my early research, if I remember correctly, this case alone is about 500 ringgit Malaysia, if you can check. Yeah, I mean, yeah, about 500. That is without the PCIe riser cable.
Let me check. The riser cable is expensive.
Yeah.
Riser cable adds another 200.
Yeah, because they are using PCIe Gen 4 riser cable.
Yeah, so it's total 728 for a short cable.
Yes, short cable, 200 ringgit. That's why long cable, I believe, is custom order.
No, they are available for sale separately.
Oh, okay.
So the one that we have here is 319 ringgit just for the cable alone.
Oh my goodness.
If you want, that one is 440 millimeters. So
yeah, it's
44 cm is very long.
Yes, it's very long.
They have 3 lengths. The shorter one is 270 millimeters. There's another even shorter one. The shortest is 145.
I would say this is not exactly super affordable.
Once you consider in PCIe, riser, the feed, if you want to use it, then yeah, the price adds up.
The price adds up. I believe this is included in the package because it's strapped inside. They don't have any separate options to purchase the feed.
Okay, let's also add on the side panel.
Okay,
119 each.
119 for the tempered glass side panel.
Yes.
For each.
So you can put both sides tempered glass if you want to.
Personally, I would not suggest you to do so because number one, your power supply needs to draw in cool air.
And then your GPU also need to breathe.
On the other side, yes, your GPU need to breathe.
Yeah, so no tempered glass is the best.
No tempered glass is the best unless those who are trying to look for sufferings, then yeah, that is part of their lifestyle. Nonetheless, I would say build quality wise, very nice, very modular, a lot of themes you can try to come up with, and this is for the first time I've seen such a unique grayscale case, and especially when you put up all the mesh panels on it, it looks simply amazing. Other than that, it is perfect for those who want to get started with maybe ITX build. Even though the previous one was mesh delicious, I think mesh delicious is really nice ITX case. This is also a very good starting point from here. So, if you have anything to add on or no?
I think I really like this case.
Yeah, I believe afterwards I would swap out some of the components. I would definitely want to go with maybe SFX power supply and ITX motherboard. Just want to like fully utilize all the space available.
I actually like this combo a lot.
Oh, really?
It fits everything nicely.
So if you have any of the questions about this case, you can always leave your question down in the comment section below, as I will still continue to build this case. I believe this is not the final form yet. Yeah. So yeah, that's all. I'll see you guys in the next video.
Not the final form.
Bye.
Okay.